Welcome everyone to today's 60-minute conversation with the author of The Exclusion Effect and Member of Parliament, Kirsty Duncan, my apologies, hosted by Nancy Wilson, CEO and founder of the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce, or CanWCC for short. My name is Catherine Chan, and just to introduce myself really quickly, I'm the COO of CanWCC, but currently acting CEO at Innovators and Entrepreneurs Foundation, and it's my pleasure to get us kicked off here today. So, CanWCC, it's the first and only Chamber of Commerce for diverse women-identified and non-binary business owners in Canada. As a Chamber of Commerce, we represent your needs with the government, and our position and title as a chamber gives us the access to people who impact change. We exist to improve the quality of life for the over 1 million entrepreneurial women, Canadian women, through advocacy with policymakers, and we aim to build a healthier and more inclusive Canadian economy. We're a nationally incorporated not-for-profit organization dedicated to equity, advancement, and connection, and which we activate through our advocacy and through our membership and community programming. Our advocacy is centered around a single issue, economic equity, and we believe that economic equity is a human right. Our free community is for allies and entrepreneurs to connect and find resources. Our business membership provides a landing place and a growth hub for women-identified entrepreneurs and organizations that are at least 50% women-owned and led. If you're interested in learning more about what we do, our advocacy and our membership, you can visit us at canwcc.ca/join. So canwcc.ca/join. The Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce operates out of the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples in what is colonially known as Toronto, Ontario. If you need support finding the land you're on, you can learn more about stewardship and the treaties connected to where you're situated by visiting native-land.ca. So let's get started. Starting with introductions. I'm thrilled to announce our guest today, author of The Exclusion Effect, Kirsty Duncan. As a newly minted PhD in medical geography, Kirsty Duncan led an international expedition to remote Svalbard, Norway, to search for the cause of the deadly 1918 influenza. What should have been a rewarding intellectual adventure turned out to be an unwanted baptism into the unbridled sexism and privilege of the scientific community. Ever since, she has devoted herself to the support of girls and women in scientific endeavors. And I know that we have many members who are also involved in the sciences who may have experienced similar. While women have come a long way since, there is still far to go. They remain underrepresented, underpaid, underpublished, and under the shadows of male scientists who are assumed without evidence to have innate capabilities that women lack. Duncan identifies systemic biases in the assessment of girls' abilities and the teaching of science in the home, the classroom, our communities, and professional life. She makes a powerful argument for cultural and institutional change to ensure girls and women their rightful place in the scientific community. Kirsty Duncan is the Member of Parliament for the riding of Etobicoke North and has been serving the community since 2008. She lives in Toronto and has been the driving force behind putting science front and center in the federal government's agenda. Welcome, Kirsty.
Thank you. Really looking forward to this.
Today's conversation will be hosted by Nancy Wilson, who's the founder and CEO of Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce. Nancy I'm ahead of myself here. Nancy is a chartered professional accountant with over 2 decades of experience across startups, multinationals, and not-for-profits. Nancy has also founded an accounting firm focused on women entrepreneurs. Named one of the 50 changemakers in the year 2023 by the Globe and Mail's Report on Business magazine, Nancy is a passionate feminist determined to make systemic change. Over to you, Nancy.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Kirsty, for being with us today. I'm really excited to talk to you about your book and your experience in general. So let's start from the beginning. Why did you write this book?
Thank you, Nancy. Just before I begin, can I just say thank you to the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce for the important work you do each and every day. And I want to acknowledge the inspiring women business leaders before me. You are smart, powerful, Yeah, the talent and ideas to excel and make a better Canada. And Nancy, I want to recognize you and Catherine and your colleagues. Congratulations on all your business accomplishments. Thank you for your vision to build a powerful network of women and to create equality in business. Okay, to answer the question, I hope the book is a clarion call for action. Women have been scientists and in STEM fields for hundreds of years now, but they have had to fight for every step forward, to be let into the universities, to sit exams, to earn degrees, to have washrooms and gyms, to be paid a salary. And we forget to be let into the Ivy League schools in the 1970s and 80s. Every step forward was a fight. That fight for equality continues. And, you know, we're just starting to see women's science stories being told on television, in the movies. That's a good thing, but we've got to see that change in every school, college, university, and the workplace. And if we look at the degree holders across the country, women are the majority in every province and territory, and they are the degree holders in most fields, except when it comes to STEM, where we are about a quarter of the graduates in architecture, computing, math, and engineering and technologies. Challenges, these are our occupations that are high quality, high paying jobs. We're half the population. We need talent. The jobs of the future are going to require AI, computing, engineering, math, IT, and physics, and that's where we're the most underrepresented. And as this group knows, if we include women, it pays off on the bottom line. And closing that gender pay gap could increase global GDP by $28 trillion.
Oh, absolutely. So, the book starts with a very striking story. Can you share, for those of us, not including myself, but for those on the call who haven't read the book, can you share your personal experiences on the international expedition to the remote Svalbard, Norway, to study the deadly 1918 influenza epidemic and how that experience shaped the book?
Sure, Nancy. Thanks for the question. I can share a bit of my story. I think every woman has a story. When I was starting out, I led an expedition 500 miles from the North Pole. I wanted to search for the cause of the 1918 influenza. It killed more people than the Black Death of the Middle Ages and more people than all the fighting of the First World War. And it happened in about 2 years. I wanted to test our current drugs against one of history's deadliest diseases, to develop a better flu vaccine and be ready for the next pandemic. Specifically, we exhumed 6 bodies of 1918 flu victims. They were buried in the permafrost, and I hoped the frozen ground would preserve the body and the virus. I led an international team of 17 men, many the best in their scientific fields, and I was their junior by 25 years. It might have had some challenges. um, Over 100 documentary companies competed to cover our work. A television movie was based on my life. I was finishing my first book. I was asked to do work for the government of Canada and the United Nations. And from the outside, it looked like I had a promising future. But it's behind the scenes. I learned I was being paid in the bottom 10th percentile of the university. Men who hadn't finished their PhDs were being hired at higher salaries than mine. And when I met with the university president, I was told I had 2 strikes against me. I was young and I was a woman. And he said, "Don't worry, there are other women in the same boat, And he justified paying less qualified men more because they had families to support. Few more. I was repeatedly harassed by a colleague. Some members of the research team tried to steal the results, and those career slams add up. By age 34, I had had enough. And like many women in science, I walked away. I left tenure. I didn't know what I would do next. The one thing I did know is I would focus on women.
Yeah, absolutely. That story sounds specific to your experience in science, but also so familiar to my story and to the stories that I hear from so many of our members, and you know what happens during their trajectory, which is such a shame.
I think that's why what you have built, Nancy, with this Chamber of Commerce matters so much. It's to share those stories. It's to bring them into the light. The more we talk about them, the better. But we can't just talk about them. We got to fix the workplace.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in the book, you discuss children's socialization differences, and you state there's a real opportunity for parents to help their children transcend narrow gender-driven expectations. The first requirement is awareness that gender expectations and roles affect nearly every aspect of life from infancy forward. So how does this early socialization affect women's participation in STEM and business? And what can we do about it?
I think there's a pipeline of problems from the gendered world children are born into, through school, college, university, and into the workplace. And I think along that pipeline, we need to fix unequal opportunity, treatment, and pay. We need to stop fixing women and fix the workplaces. And you're right, it starts early. We have gender reveal parties, pink and blue everything, toys that send coded messages about what's appropriate for boys and girls, along with harmful expectations and a continuing belief that boys are better in math and science. Sometimes it's perpetuated by parents, teachers, media, algorithms, the workplace. And, you know, if we look at, some parents will Google, is my son gifted? 2.5 times more often than is my daughter gifted. In the United Kingdom, we see about 70% of parents will have a conversation with their sons about a STEM career. It's 56% for daughters. In countries like Chile, Hungary, and Portugal, 50% of parents believe their son should have a STEM career compared to 20% of girls. And then you look at the curriculum. The textbooks, they're learning the same long list of scientists I learned. Do they learn about Mary Curie, Jane Goodall, Donna Strickland, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics here in Canada? I could go on.
Right. Yeah. Well, speaking of that, in the US, currently, mentions of women's participation in a variety of fields have been removed, including women's achievements and contributions to space travel and the aerospace industry. What does removing noteworthy women's work signal to you?
Oh, you asked such good questions. I realized I didn't finish your last one, so I'm just gonna pick up a bit on
Yeah.
it before I address that. I think it's really important that having an encouraging mother, father, teacher will really increase girls' interests in STEM. And I think it's up to all of us to make math and science fun, part of play, bring in scientists and business leaders like all of you into classrooms. that so that children can imagine a future full of possibility. And it's important to show that most differences between girls and boys are really shaped by the environment. We need that equal expectation, equal opportunity, and equal treatment. And I really should go on to your next question. This isn't a new phenomenon. I'm going to take you back to the 1950s. Yale University was particularly preoccupied with the character of manliness. They even boasted how many students they had over 6 feet tall. And literally, and then in 1969, there's this woman, Margaret Rossiter. She's at Yale University. She's studying the history of science, and she dares ask, have there ever been any women scientists? And the answer is no, never, none. I mean, this isn't centuries ago. This is 1969 at one of the world's top universities, and it's a flat denial of the existence of trailblazing women. So she presents a counterexample and says, what about Marie Curie? You know, she'd won 2 Nobel Prizes, and her contribution is dismissed. They claim she didn't count. And this is known as the Matilda effect. It's the denial or dismissal of women's contributions to science and scholarship. And I think this is really important, and it's why your network is so important. Women are not one-dimensional. We are a beautiful intersection of gender, indigeneity, race, disability, sexual orientation, and more. And when our contributions are removed, we do more than rewrite the record. It's erasure. It's a denial of existence, a violation of human rights and dignity. It is a tool of oppression, and it signals regression in gender equality, a barrier to progress, and it hinders scientific progress.
Agreed. Agreed. You also write how not having women participate in STEM reinforces and reenacts patriarchal power dynamics between women and men. This is my jam. Can you talk more about that?
Yes, I can. So again, I'm going to give some historical context here because it's not something we teach in schools, and this matters. For millennia, women's lives were governed by men. Fathers, husbands, brothers, teachers shaped a world defined by men, for men, in culture, knowledge, and law. And historically, whatever society prized most was attributed to men, and women were deemed to lack it. So we were at times said to lack a soul, the proper brain, the right hormones, genius, a supposed math gene, and even the right personality traits. Male-led science sought to prove women's intellectual inferiority. Even history's most famous biologist, Charles Darwin, believed that women lacked male capabilities. Women were expected in Western culture to have only 2 roles, and when they strayed from those roles, it was often pathologized. And you saw in the 20th century, this logic led to women being subjected to lobotomies, brutal surgical procedures intended to make them more compliant and docile. And what I find deeply troubling today is the persisting belief that brains are either male or female, that you can sex a brain, and that biological sex alone is still treated as destiny when it comes to ability and achievement, even though we know from science that the brain is no more gendered than the heart, kidneys, and liver, and that brain is plastic. It changes constantly through our lives.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's a
It's
theme
a
in the
heavy
book.
sigh,
I
Nancy.
know, I know. There's a theme throughout the book that about what could be lost without women's work and voices in STEM. What could that look like, and why is that so important?
Oh, you ask good questions. For centuries, male experts studied men, and they presumptively extended those results to all people. So as recently, I mean, these years will shock you. As recently as 1958, there was the Baltimore longitudinal study, and it looked at normal human aging, except it enrolled no women. And it took 20 years to fix that omission. In 1986, researchers at one university looked at the impact of obesity on estrogen activity and breast and uterine cancer. Yet no woman was included in the study. It's a pretty good trick. What might have happened if the academic and scientific communities had been more inclusive of women? Researchers from racialized backgrounds, Indigenous scholars, scientists with disabilities, members of the 2S LGBTQI plus community. Would it have taken to the 1970s for breast cancer to become an issue of national concern? When HIV/AIDS first emerged, would the 2S LGBTQI plus community have been stigmatized, something to be feared? And today I still hear from women about the struggles they face, not being believed about their symptoms, facing delays in diagnosis, struggling to access proper treatment. Far too many have a story to tell. We are half the population. We know there are sex-based differences in disease, diagnosis, treatment response, and the outcomes. And yet still we know less about every aspect of female biology than we do about male biology.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been having conversations with some of my girlfriends from high school who I'm still close with about perimenopause and symptoms. And all of them are saying that they learn more by talking to other women than they do by talking to their doctors.
Nancy, I think you raise a really important issue, and it's men are not the norm. Women are not outliers, but medicine has been shaped by generations who assumed that women were inferior versions of men or simply reproductive bodies. And that thinking persists today. Investments in women's health is paltry. The focus continues to be on reproductive health, an important priority, but it is far, to your point, from the whole picture. We have to address women's health across the lifespan. And we know that women suffer more from autoimmune disease, dementia, heart disease, and they remain under-researched, underdiagnosed, and undertreated.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to switch to a couple of audience questions now.
Lovely.
All right, the first one is, do you believe that mentorship between women plays a unique or important role in our personal and or professional development?
I absolutely do. I think what you have built and building the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce really matters. Women need a safe place where they can come together, where they can talk about the challenges they face, where they can meet other women who have different experiences, give ideas, and it makes such a difference. I think so many of us grew, I know my own experience of being the one woman in the room, of being the one woman in the department, the one woman at the conference, the one woman at the speaker is so hard. And to have a Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce now that can advocate for equality, to be a constant presence, is really going to change things for women and for the country.
Awesome. I obviously agree with you.
I
completely.
think it will really change business, it will change communities, and it will change our country, and that all of you are going to do things that we cannot even imagine.
So following from that, we'll put you in the mentor role for a moment and ask, what would be your best advice for a woman who's trying to make her place in a very male-dominated industry? Like, do you, from your personal experience, do you have any key lessons that you could share, or just advice for a woman trying to dig her heels in and take up space in a male-dominated industry?
I love that question. What I have always shared with my students is impossible is a dare. If someone tells you you can't do something, set out to prove them wrong. And I take challenges as speed bumps in the road. You have to figure a way over them or around them. And I always remind them on those very hard days that there is always one more person cheering you on. And it really is to take your place, because you belong, you matter, we need you, we need your ideas. You bring a different perspective, and that perspective and that story allows you to see things that haven't been seen before, and will allow you to make new products and new services and to really change Canada.
Absolutely. So here's a great question. I love these questions. How can educational institutions and governments better support the intersectional challenges faced by women of color, Indigenous women, and those with disabilities in STEM fields?
Oh, I appreciate this question so much. It really matters. Because of the challenges I faced when I was appointed Minister of Science, I was determined to tackle equity, diversity, inclusion against all advice and all odds. But I took them on head on, because I know what women face. I know that things had improved for some women, but those intersectionalities matter. And one of the first things I did, we had these very prestigious research chairs. And for 20 years, our universities failed to make their targets. And I gave them 2 years to make the targets, or I would withhold funding. They didn't just make the targets, they beat them. And what they learned is we got better science. We had new questions being asked, new methodologies, results that didn't just fit one group of people, but results for everyone. Government absolutely has a role to play. And I'll just say, for far too long, there have been people knocking at the door. The welcome has not been warm. And it's all of us who have to speak up for people. It is not just one group. They have done, many groups have done the hard work, but all of us have to be a voice to build an inclusive Canada.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's move on to my favorite topic, which is advocacy. So recognizing that all business owners are different, are there any skills or attributes that entrepreneurs often have that would also support participation in STEM industries? Like, I would call this like transferable skills or traits between entrepreneurs in general and STEM?
It's a great question. So I don't run a business by myself right now, but I have taught leadership to the vice presidents of one of our large chartered banks. And I used to teach in an executive MBA program. And I have really seen striking similarities between courageous women entrepreneurs and fearless women in STEM. And that mindset matters. Both groups forge their own paths. You imagine futures that don't yet exist, and then you set out to build them. You challenge the status quo, think creatively. You constantly search for smarter, better ways to solve problems, and you spot opportunities early. And that's what researchers do. You set bold goals and you pursue them with persistence, grit, unwavering focus, and you take risks, not recklessly, but with courage and calculation. And when things get tough, you adapt, you bounce back, you keep going. And I hope that you always trust in your vision, your talents, and your power to inspire others to join your mission. And I'll say to you what I have always said throughout my life. I hope you remember on those hard days, because in all our lives, there are hard days. There's always one more person cheering you on.
Yeah. So CanWCC is actively lobbying for what we're calling a new child income support policy. So that, and what we're advocating for is essentially like a mat leave or a parental income policy that's separate from EI and separate from salaried work, so that all parents would receive income following the birth or adoption of a child, regardless of their employment status. So it would cover students, it would cover business owners, as well as people in the workforce. So what other advocacy similar to this do you think is needed to advance women's equitable participation in the economy?
Okay, great. I'll take some time here because I think I hope I can be useful for
Yeah,
you here
please.
and to your colleagues. Obviously, the heavy lifting is going to fall to your organization, but I believe it is fundamentally important to have a minister for women, someone who is going to champion the cause of gender equality at the highest level until equality is achieved. And, you know, one of the reasons I ran for federal office was because I couldn't stand that in a country as rich as Canada, that there were children who went to school hungry. Hungry children cannot learn. And when I was elected, it's been 16 years. I'm not running in this election. I brought this issue to Parliament, and it was seen as provincial or territorial, despite thousands and thousands of children hurting. And I kept pushing for years and years. And today that program is being built. That said, let me give you some practical tips. It starts with relationships. Like any meaningful connection in life, they take time and care. So, do you know the members of the Parliamentary Status of Women Committee? Do you know the minister? Have you introduced yourself? Do you have that rapport? Do you stay in touch? And remember, this is important because after every election, committees are reconstituted. You may have new members, and that relationship building begins again. We have to understand the political landscape. We have to know how it works. So the throne speech will happen after the election. It's the government's vision statement. You read it carefully. What priorities does it highlight? What is missing? Where can your organization fit in? And how do you help move priorities forward? The budget process, this is important. It's messy. Democracy is messy, but it matters. So be clear in your ask, persistent in your efforts, and speak with a united voice. How do you build that coalition? And even then, there are no guarantees. Ministers may pick up the mantle, they may fight on your behalf, but there's still compromise. And that's the reality. But if you don't succeed at first, you got to keep going. You got to be persistent, because it really is about these competing priorities. Is this helpful so far, Nancy, or should I give you a little
Absolutely.
more?
No, absolutely.
Is it?
This is great. This is great.
Okay, so it's those competing priorities. So does the government invest in income supports, hungry children, climate action? Every dollar is a choice. So the case has to be compelling, focused, and timely. And just the last two things I would say is we have to know how those committees work, because they can really help organizations in the House of Commons and in the Senate. That's where really much of the work happens. So we need to know what's being studied there. Is there a bill under review that touches your mandate? Can you testify? There are opportunities to shape the conversation. So really, the last thing I'll say is we have to know the system we want to change. When we come together, we speak with one voice, and we present clear, united asks, we are powerful. When we're divided, we're easier to ignore.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most important things that you mentioned is coalition building.
Coalition building,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
That powerful, let's all come together, one voice. We focus, we work together, we stay constructive, and
yeah,
hopefully we build a stronger, more equitable Canada.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's what's the coalition building is definitely what's been on my mind lately, because, we don't have to say, forget about the climate to still ask for women's equality and equity to be on the agenda. We can say, let's tackle both, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I come back to we are half the population. We are not outliers. We deserve a minister for the status of women who is going to stay focused on issues that are important to women and who's going to champion them, because we are still many generations away from equality.
Yeah, absolutely. So, on that note, as we approach the looming election coming up in 6 days, what questions would you advise women to be asking their MPs about?
Oh, that's a good one. So I guess I would start by saying, for me, the most meaningful part of election season is going door to door. It's connecting, it's listening, it's learning. And I've been very lucky. I serve the community where I'm born and raised. We are one of the most diverse communities in the country. So I got to go door to door in Gujarati, Hindi, Italian, Punjabi, Somali, and Tamil. And I really cherish the chance to spend time with our families, hear their concerns, be part of their lives, the joyful days, the difficult ones, everything in between. I mean, it's a real privilege to be invited into someone's home. And every doorstep conversation is a chance to understand and sometimes act right on that spot. If a family's got a challenge, there's things you can do. So when a candidate comes to your door, use that opportunity. Ask the questions that matter most to you and your family. What are they offering? Not just in terms of platforms, but in action to address the challenges you face. Are they willing to fight for what matters to you? And I come back to, I know in the next government, I want a dedicated minister for the status of women, someone who's going to champion equity, diversity, inclusion across Canadian society in health, business, and STEM. I mean, we've come a long way, but there's work that needs to be done. You know, we look at the women's movement, I mean, of the 60s, fighting for equal employment, pay equity, action against gender-based violence. And yet many of these same issues persist today. And I don't have to tell this group, but you know, a 2016 survey found there were more CEOs of large US companies named John than there were CEOs who were women. And I think we really have to acknowledge where we are in this moment.
Agreed.
Yeah, millennia of patriarchy, centuries of slow reform, and a growing backlash against process. We are generations away from equality. And you hear politicians talking about scrapping woke ideology. This is not the time to pull back on diversity and inclusion efforts. It's the time to double down, to demand better for ourselves, for our daughters, and the future of the country.
Yes, 100%.
We can't afford to backtrack. We just cannot.
Agreed. Agreed. I think, yes, I agree with you 100%.
I know you do. You've built your life doing this work.
Yeah. And just on a side note, I grew up just south of you. I'm in Etobicoke Center. You're in Etobicoke North.
I did not realize that, Nancy. Which schools did you go to?
Well, my closest high school was Ridgeview Collegiate. So I grew
We're
up at,
neighbors.
yeah, Kipling and Eglinton. That's where I grew up.
And I live at Kipling and Eglinton.
Oh my gosh, there you go.
We're literally neighbors.
Yeah, West End girls.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. We'll have to have coffee sometime soon.
I look forward to that.
Yeah. So back to women in tech. So I know there's business owners out there who think maybe they aren't tech savvy or maybe they're not influential enough to make a difference at this point in STEM. What would you say to them?
I'd say you absolutely can make a difference. And the truth is, we need you. Right now, there is a critical need for more women to be involved in STEM, not just in code or labs, but how we design the world. We need your perspective. So let me give you some real world examples. I've talked about for decades, you know, medical research was done largely on white men. This will surprise people. It wasn't until 1993 that the US required women and minorities to be included in clinical trials. 1993. And it wasn't until 2014 for researchers that they had to begin testing female lab animals or cells. That's a decade ago.
Wow.
If we look at the work of Caroline Criado Perez, she documented countless everyday tools that just weren't designed with women in mind. Work boots that didn't fit, phones that are too big for women's hands, safety goggles and police vests that ignored female bodies. Even airbags in cars were originally designed and tested using only male dummies. And that resulted, we forget, in more women and children being hurt or killed in crashes. And it's not until 2011 that crash tests finally included female prototypes. And now I think this is really important with AI. We're at risk of repeating these mistakes and potentially on a larger scale. If data is biased, the results will be too. So we're already seeing AI tools that misgender women in translations. She said becomes he said, that misread facial expressions in Asian people, or fail to detect skin cancer accurately on darker skin. That's using flawed data and repeating the mistakes of the past. So why does it matter to business owners like you? Because you help shape the teams, decisions, and products that are going to define our future. You don't need to be a coder to ask better questions, demand more inclusive solutions, or advocate for diverse voices. This is influence and it's essential.
Awesome. So we're coming up to 10 minutes to the hour. So I'm going to switch again to some audience questions.
Okay.
Let me see here. So one of the questions in terms of advocacy and women in medicine, etc., the question is, how do we overcome the societal thinking that women's pain is normal and is not taken seriously? It is par for the course for us.
That question breaks my heart. It's one I have, I'm a former health professor, and it's what I've heard the last 16 years. I have heard from women across the country. It is hard to be believed about their symptoms. It is hard to get a diagnosis. It is hard to get treatment. And this has got to change. And if I look at politics, the focus remains on women's reproductive health. I come back to this is an important aspect of our lives, but we are children, we become adolescents, we grow older, and we really have to look at health across the lifespan. And I mean, it was never okay that it took to the 1970s for breast cancer to become an issue of concern. I would really like to see the next government focus on a minister for status of women, but I also want to see women's health really raised on the national agenda and not being sidelined.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think some of the arguments that I've heard against having a separate ministry for women and gender equality is the idea of having that notion mainstreamed. So, it's embedded or, a part of everything. And I think that's great. And I think that should happen so that the Ministry of Health has, women as part of its essential mandate. But I don't think that necessarily removes the need for a separate ministry for women and gender equality.
I absolutely agree. Women need to be, and the issues that we face need to be embedded across government. But I think it is important that we can't go back 50 years and lose a champion. If we really look at the health piece, it can't just be women's reproductive health. I come back to, we know we suffer more from autoimmune disease, dementia, heart disease. I mean, in the past, there were studies called Mr. Fit. They didn't even consider women as having heart issues. And that women would go to the hospital and they were sent home because they thought it was indigestion and not heart. And we still under-researched, underdiagnosed, and undertreated. This has to change.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. One last audience question. How can we do a better job of matching women entrepreneurs with women in STEM so that important discoveries are commercialized to the benefit of Canadian society and the world at large?
Oh, such an important question. I love that. I mean, one of the challenges, as you all know, that we face is that gap, right? How do we go from research to getting that research into society? And I think it's really important that we build those bridges. Um, at the university, at the college level, we're starting to see, we're seeing many more incubators where our students who have ideas can start to build them. I mean, it's really exciting when you visit some of these institutions and see the research that our university students are doing, the support they're getting from the business school, and getting those ideas out there. But the more we can have those incubators, the more we can bring people together, uh, the the better. And I think there's a real opportunity to bring people who work in the STEM fields, their research, their ideas, their technologies, but they need the help of people like you. And I think there's a real opportunity to create those spaces.
Yeah. Amazing. It has been such a pleasure having this discussion with you, Kirsty, and I really appreciate your time and your passion. I just I get excited about everything when I talk to you, and I think it's always such a pleasure for me to talk to somebody who is as excited about similar things, to speak to a like-minded person. I understand we need to have discussions with people who don't agree with us, but it is also such a pleasure to speak to someone who is on the same page, and working towards the same goals.
Nancy, it has been a real honor and privilege to join you and to be inspired by the work you and your colleagues are doing, and to meet these incredible leaders you work with who are going to build a better environment, society, and future. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for the work you do to build better business, stronger communities, and a more inclusive Canada. I can't wait to watch what comes next for you all, and just know I'll be cheering.
Absolutely. Thank you also to Serena Mercier, who is part of the publishing house that published The Exclusion Effect. Don't forget, you can purchase your copy of The Exclusion Effect at Sutherland House Books, at their website. And if you use code CANWCC25, you'll receive 25% off the hardcover book. So thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you at the next event.